Welcome to the future. PBS Digital.
All over America, battered mothers are losing custody of their children when they file for divorce.
I naively thought that, if somebody molests their kid, I thought they'd just go to jail.
Even with a proven record, abusers are winning joint and sole custody.
To win custody of the kids over and against the mother's will is the ultimate victory, short of killing the kids.
I was just snatched up from my normal life, and all that anyone would tell me was that my mom was crazy and that she was going into the mental hospital.
In a case where those children have been abused or the mom has been abused, what's really best for children is for their safety to be made the top priority and for their healing.
It was just so scary because I was like, let's run away, let's get out of here, Because, all this has happened. I mean, what kind of person would take you away from your mom?
A third of the women in the U.S. will be victims of domestic violence. It will have devastating effects on their children. The Mary Kay Ash Charitable Foundation is proud to underwrite this program.
Sometimes there's one child in a family, and then everybody kind of agrees to abuse that poor child. Well, that wasn't true with me. My older brother was once almost beaten to death by my father. My sister was abused to a lesser degree, but she was quite terrified of my father. And as both my brother and sister would have agreed, because I was the youngest and the last one, and he had become much more of a violent alcoholic, I received the most brutal, the worst treatment.
He would fly into his rages just for no reason at all and start just behaving like an animal. And so I used to wonder if I were doing something wrong to provoke him to do that. And it took me years and years and years to realize that there was really nothing that I could do.
The fear, the best description, the best two words probably are constant fear. That's the first thing. It's constant. It's always eating away at you. And another description I would say is another description of the intimidation I'd say is ruthlessness.
He was starting to reach in the drawer for the revolver. And I remember going toward my sister and grabbing the knife out of her hand and putting it on the table and saying, "There." And I must have been maybe, 11 years old at the time, 10, 11, 12, something like that. And then my dad, withdrew his hand from the drawer. So I know I've been asked quite often, have you ever called the police? Was it, neighbors ever called the police? My dad was the police.
I had a pretty good life until I started, until my mom and my dad started to have arguments and over the whole custody thing.
We went to court for the first time December of '95. The attorney put a restraining order on him for his actions with the abuse. By January of '96, he told me that he was going to ruin me and destroy me. That's when he came back to tell me that he would be taking Sarah away from me.
When I was walking to school with one of my friends, and he came in his car and pulled over, and he tried to get me to talk to him, but I did, and he said, do you want to live with me? And I said, I don't know, but because I was afraid if I said no, then he would just keep asking questions, and whenever I saw him, he was always ask why was I shaking, because I started shaking in front of him, because it's just scary, and I don't know what he's gonna do.
The court said that my daughter spent too much time with me. They wanted Sarah to go into daycare because after school, they wanted to start getting her used to staying away from me.
It's very widespread, unfortunately, among abusers to use custody and visitation litigation as a continuing weapon of the abuse. And Custody and visitation litigation can make it impossible, in one sense, for a woman ever to escape the abuse.
To win custody of the kids over and against the mother's will is the ultimate victory, short of killing the kids. It's the best way to hurt her and kick her down is to get her kids.
They said that my daughter was afraid of her dad. She didn't want to visit with him alone, and that was my doing. He was pulling her out of cars to visit with him, even when she didn't want to leave. And they said that I wasn't pushing her out of the car. Basically, they said that I should just bodily take her out of the car and drive away. And at that point, they got it in motion to start this parental alienation syndrome that they charged me with.
Parental alienation syndrome is a theory that was invented by a man named Richard Gardner. He said there is a syndrome called parental alienation whereby the custodial parent, who is usually the mother, is trying to alienate the children from the father. And she's doing it by raising these false abuse allegations.
If you have a child who is reluctant or refuses to visit a parent, or who makes complaints that the other parent is abusing them and refuses to go to visitation, the cause of that is the mother doing things to sabotage the relationship with the father.
Gardner's research has been thoroughly debunked by the American Psychological Association, and every other credible scientific expert that has looked at his work has said that there's no scientific validity to it. But they have acknowledged that nonetheless the courts are interpreting the facts in front of them in this light. And so if a mother comes into custody court and says, the father battered me and is putting the children at risk, or has even abused the children, the immediate response is, she's alienating. This is called parental alienation, Your Honor. She's just trying to alienate the children from the father. This is what mothers do. What we know statistically is that several studies have found that 75% of contested custody cases, 75% of those cases have a history of domestic violence. What that tells you is, if you're a judge and you're sitting on a contested custody docket, don't be surprised when abuse is brought up.
There are dozens and dozens who will all agree with me that this junk science called parental alienation syndrome has been responsible for so much harm. And yet I am aware every day of judges basing decisions on this, and psychologists using this as knowledge and making recommendations to judges because of this junk science. And it is appalling and responsible for so much harm.
I received something in the mail. I did not have an attorney at the time, and the court-appointed attorney for my daughter said that it was just going to be changing the visitation sites. They ordered me to come into court, and that's when they had already made their decision to charge me with parental alienation, and they took her away that day, saying that I was not to go to her school, pick her up, that her dad would be picking her up. 2 days later is when he told her that she wouldn't be coming back to me.
I was in the van with him, and I remember, like, can I go back to my mom? And because it was the day I was supposed to go back that day, and he's like, you're not going back. And I remember because we were going to Safeway. And I ran to the payphone and dialed 911, and I said, help me. But I hung up, but I was too scared. I just wanted to run away. I remember kicking and screaming, and he's like, stop it. And he's really calm about it then. But I just couldn't get over the fact that I couldn't go back to my mom. And I tried calling her. I tried going back to the house. Yes, and I remember I remember he let me go there just to say goodbye.
She knocked at the door, and she was just hysterical. Asking me to run away with her.
She's like, we couldn't, and I felt really sick, and I had to use the bathroom, and I was all scared, and I just couldn't handle it. And I remember him coming up the stairs and knocking on the door and telling us to go, but it was just so scary because I'm like, let's run away, let's get out of here, because all this has happened. I mean, what kind of person would take you away from your mom?
When a woman goes to court seeking custody of her children and seeking to restrict the batterer's visitation with the children, she's not asking the court to protect her children. She is simply asking the court to permit her to protect her children. And what is happening is not that the court is failing to offer her protection. What is in fact happening is that the court is forbidding her to protect her children from a very well-known, very well-established danger.
Parents have a right to protect their children from abuse by the other parent. Protective fathers have a right to protect their children from abuse by the other parent. But it happens for certain reasons of social conditioning that the person that children are needing to be protected from is more often a father than a mother.
We walk into these courts, we think that they're going to do right by us, and we lose our children. And this is the best kept dirty little secret of our family court system. So once you're defeated, it's almost like a process to get back on your feet. And if you look at it that way, you really have to take the emotion out of it. If you got the emotion in it, you're done. And then go through the process of how to rebuild it back to where it makes any type of sense. You have to get yourself up and then fight it, because it is a battle.
Cases where the mother alleges battering and risk to children, how many of those cases are being awarded custody to fathers? And what the studies are showing is roughly 2/3 award joint or sole custody to fathers who are accused or adjudicated of battering.
There is a societal misconception that mothers are very heavily favored in custody and visitation litigation over fathers, and that somehow will take care of the needs of mothers who need to protect their children from a battering or sexually abusive father. In fact, the maternal preference went out more than 20 years ago. And the research studies that we have had in most recent years not only show that the maternal preference has disappeared, but in fact that fathers now have preference for custody.
When we were a family, he picked on my mom, and now he has no one else but me, and he won't pick on his girlfriends. So, and I'm the only one that's there.
Well, well, our grandmother believed me, but, well, the rest of the world thought he was just this very respectable, perfect person who was this big lawyer, and he was in the, in this club, and he went to church every week and everything, and to everybody else thought he was this perfect person with a perfect family that was really nice, and he was nice to his family and everything.
Much more often than not, an abuser is someone who comes off well when he's talking to people outside the family. He knows how to present himself as a calm, reasonable person. Often he's actually quite skilled at presenting himself as a victim of an unreasonable or vindictive or hysterical woman.
My ex-husband is extremely violent. When he becomes angry, he can't check his anger. You can see anger come over him physically. He becomes red. His entire demeanor changes. If you don't get away physically, you will be hit.
There would be no telling when he would just fly into a rage and start breaking things and hitting people. Yeah. So we had to be very, very quiet and stay out of his way, do whatever he said, and try to, live on the fringes without provoking him too much.
If he found out that the kids or I had any enthusiasm or excitement about participating in anything, or that we might be having friends or any kind of normal life, he would take steps to cut that off.
One of the things